still a journalist back in God knows when. It was back in the late 90s. So I was following the case, like Moses Sitholi's case, right up until he was sentenced. And then once he was sentenced, I actually wrote him a letter. I wanted kind of an exclusive interview behind bars to find out, his motivation for doing what he did and just kind of dig deeper into the story. So I wrote him a letter, just appealing to him as, a journalist that wants to hear his side of what happened. And he responded to me about 5 years later. I kept the same cell number. So he called me and said that I'd written to him requesting to write his life story, which was a lie. And by this time I had just started my business actually. So at first I was baffled by this call because I actually thought it was a prank call. I just thought I couldn't recall even approaching this man. And he'd been in prison for so long, everybody, the public had forgotten about him, and I had left journalism to start my business. And so at first I said to him, look, I think, you know what, can I call you later? Because I think I need to think about this, And he said to me, well, I'm in prison, you can't call me. Maybe I can call you, just tell me when. So he called me about 2 days later. And by then, I had actually kind of recollected writing this letter all those years ago. And I thought about his proposal. He was saying I must write his biography. And I think inside every journalist is that kind of secret yearning to write a book. And in terms of destiny, it just seemed like the right time. My business was not that busy, And I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to realize a lifelong dream, as much as it's a twisted version of what I had in mind as far as writing a novel. So I went to see him, we developed a relationship. I would, take notes. It's hard to interview somebody at Pretoria Siemens because you're not even allowed to bring a notebook. So it was quite challenging. And I told myself to be patient with the process because at first he seemed to want to be quite open about what actually happened. He started telling me about his childhood. He was abused. This is his version of events. But as I got deeper into his story, chasing his court files and tracking basically the history of what happened, I realized that his whole reason for this whole setup was to redeem himself. It was also he wanted to actually also appeal the case. So I was an instrument in that grand plan. And clearly it was a big lie, a lot of what he was starting to tell me. And so I abandoned the project altogether. But then I met up with a publisher. I came across a publisher whom I told the whole story, and he said, this is fantastic, you could actually fictionalize this and make something of it. And so that's how Radiant came to be. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that Angela got a call from Moses Sitholi today.
Yeah,
so he's still stalking her, even from prison. He's a friend. Not on Facebook, I hope.
No.
Okay, that's great. So your second novel was appropriately titled Black Widow Society and explored the premise of your third novel. Oh, your third novel. Was the second one The Candle? Okay, so the second one was 30th Candle. Apologies, my research was not so good. And it's another story full of human page-turning suspense and dealt with the escapades and sexual misadventures of 4 modern women as they searched for happiness and hope for love. Why do you think the age of 30 is such a watershed for us ladies?
Well, talking from my personal experience, what was happening in my life was that I just felt this pressure, and I don't know if it was self-imposed or if it was a bit of societal pressure, family pressure, and a bit of self-imposition. But I felt just this need to kind of, self-actualize into this grown-up. It was the most grown-up I felt, prior to that time. And also, obviously around you, you see your friends progressing in different directions, and you kind of struck by this fear that are you making the best of your life? Are you where you thought you would be at that time? So it was quite interesting for me to explore that, and it was cathartic for me actually to explore those different realms of what it is that you think or believe or you impose on yourself as expectations of where you should be at that time. But it was a very fun novel. Women really reacted well to it. Very funny as well, and men were puzzled by it. Men, why are you always puzzled by our issues? But yes, it was a fun ride.
And that's 30. Wait till you get to 50. That's even more scary. Okay, so the third novel is Black Widow Society. And that explored the premise of a syndicate that helped women get out of abusive relationships by having their spouses knocked off. What motivated you to write a book about this controversial topic?
That's what motivated me. I'll get into a whole lot of trouble. No, my husband had to read the first draft because I always say my search browser history, at that time, because I had to look for ways to eliminate a plugin and get away with it. So you can imagine, if you went to my Google search, it was just, oh my gosh, eye-poppingly horrendous. I would have been arrested. So I tried to make sure that my husband lives for as long as possible because of that book. So the reason I wrote the book, I think it was a time in South Africa when there were quite a few cases, actually high-profile cases of women killing their husbands. And the common thread was that it was, a hitman would be hired, insurance fraud. But it was puzzling for me because it was actually at the time that I was, my relationship with my now husband was getting serious. And you think about all these things and all the feelings that you're feeling and the prospects, the future that you're planning. And so for me, it just boggled my mind how a woman would go from, declaring I'm dying love for this man to go and, as you say. And so when I investigated it, and there were, so a few of the cases I actually kind of drilled down and looked at the motivation behind it. And I discovered that with quite a few of these women, there was a lot of abuse, and whether emotional or physical abuse. So it was a case of somebody, not with all of them, of course with some of them it's just really insurance fraud and all of that, but there were real issues behind a woman basically taking that step. So it was quite interesting for me to explore that. And so yeah, that's what motivated me to write that book. But I also again had fun with it. I try, even if I tackle a serious topic, I try to bring a bit of humor and satire in it, and I think that's I've noticed that's the trend with women-written crime fiction. Not necessarily the humor, but there's always kind of a different element to it. Whether it's a love story, kind of a softer angle to it, that makes it a bit more human. It's not just kind of an action, high-paced story that's kind of moving. There's always kind of a deeper storyline there that is very human and humane, that I think is quite an interesting kind of phenomenon coming up with woman-written crime fiction. Yeah.
I think you need to give James Patterson some lessons. I think he needs.
He co-writes a lot of women.
He does, yes, but there are a lot of. So now on to your latest book, and the one we've all been waiting to read, The Blessed Girl. Oh, is it blessed or blessed? Okay. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what a blesser is, does anyone not know what a blesser is?
Don't disappoint me.
Okay. You don't know, okay. Okay. So a blesser is usually an older man with lots of money who provides things like money, expensive gifts, and luxurious trips to young women in exchange for company or sexual favors. So blessers are like sugar daddies, but a lot richer, yes, a lot richer. Yeah. So the girls or the women who accept the material things a blesser provides are then called the blessee. And a blessee is normally a young female who is financially cared for by her blesser in exchange for sexual favors or companionship. So this is a highly topical subject at the moment. Can you tell us about your character, your main character, Bontle Tao, and how she became involved in this blesser situation?
Okay, I think I'm going to take a risk and actually let her do the talking. So the book is written from the point of view of a blessee. The character's name is Untitled. She's very confident, very self-assured in herself and, you know, the life path that she's chosen. So I'm going to read like the first two paragraphs of the book. She starts off by saying, my name is Untitled. The first thing you'll notice about me is my honeycomb complexion, my almond-shaped eyes, the mole on the right corner of my mouth, and my luscious lips. From a very young age, I knew that I was exceptionally beautiful. I saw it in the way that adults looked at me, the compliments showered upon my mother for my good looks, the way that grown men would stop and gape at me. At school, teachers would give me a free pass on tasks that were expected of other children. From the moment I was born, my parents knew that I was destined to go far, purely because of the way that I looked. Hence, they named me Bontle, the beautiful one. It doesn't hurt that my surname Tao means lion. I'm a beautiful and fierce lioness. Watch out, world. People don't understand that when your physical attributes are the most exceptional things about you, the sun orbits around your world instead of the other way around. If I were given the option to spend a lifetime as Albert Einstein or as Marilyn Monroe, I'd choose Marilyn Monroe every time, drugs and all. I think that despite some of her bad choices, she still had a much better quality of life than that weird-looking chemist, or was he a scientist? Oh, whatever. I love girls who know how to make the most of their looks. Marilyn Monroe was the original blessee, and you can quote me on that one. So that is just a little taste of what it is. So she believes in, you know, she's got kind of life philosophies. She reads The Secret. She's got vision boards, you know, and she has New Year's resolutions that feature such audacious goals as owning a news cafe, obviously courtesy of a blesser. She's not gonna, you know, sort it out. So this is the life path that she's chosen, but she's kind of a deeper character than that, because, you know, when we first encounter her, we just kind of want to dismiss her as this flaky, very superficial creature that is basically using her looks to kind of ride it out in life. But we get to know that she was raised by a Shibin Queen mother, and she had a very difficult childhood in the sense that her mom is the one that kind of inculcated the sense of you have to use your looks are a commodity, and when it comes to men, you have to use your looks to basically accelerate your way through life. If you want to gain certain material things, and you know, this is it. This is the package that you have to use. So yes, she went to private schools, courtesy of her mother. You know, really toiling at her shebeen to get her through that. But at the same time, she always recognized that she was different from the other kids. They lived in the suburbs. Their parents went on expensive holidays, while she always had to go to her grandmother's house in Hammanskraal. So she's kind of has this chip on her shoulder that she is going to access these beautiful things, and she decides, because now people they debate whether she's smart or not, because she always says that she's got street smarts, but she's not book smart. So she's never really prioritized academic success, you know, in her life. She's always said, I'm gonna use my looks and my street smarts to get to where I'm going. And so we learned that she's also got a younger brother who struggles with addiction. Her family has a big kind of addiction history, a big history with addiction. And she's a depressive. So she's a very complicated woman. And as much as she tries to kind of seem as if she's got this glamorous lifestyle on lockdown, there's quite a lot of hurt and pain in her that kind of drives her to make some of the decisions that she makes. So yeah, and she's quite humorous and blasé about a whole lot of things. So the book is satire, but I think it's got a lot of depth as you kind of uncover the different layers that make this woman who she is.
She's not based on you at all. Well, you're gorgeous, let's face it. Is she based on anyone you know?
No. No, I'm joking. She is based, but she is based on a few people.
Okay. So the government has taken a stance that older men using their economic status to get attention and sex from young women is a form of abuse. Do you agree with this?
I'm actually torn about making generalized statements about this phenomenon because when I've admitted on different platforms that when I started writing this book, I was very judgmental. I was coming from a very judgmental point of view. I just thought that it was despicable that young women would rely on their looks basically to, get somewhere in life. And I thought it was exploitative. And as a feminist, it just was something that, I could not empathize with or understand. But when I spoke to some women in this blesser lifestyle, I discovered that, in some of these relationships, yes, it starts out as being exploitative, it's older men, younger women, but some of them end up marrying these people. And then with some of them as well, yes, or you find a young woman who's struggling at home. I'm not condoning this in any way, who's struggling to further her studies, and these men help them, complete their studies and all of that. So I'm very cautious to police a relationship between a man and a woman. But at the same time, I can see how exploitative it can get because the power dynamics are vastly different. You've got this man who is married, number one, much older, much wealthier. And with some of these women, it's really, with some, like Bonke, it's somebody who's telling herself that she's on this path and she's smart and she knows exactly what she wants out of it, and there's a lot of manipulation going on. But in a situation where a young woman has been kind of taken in by this man and is groomed to be a mistress, a short to medium term mistress, and may or may not be discarded like further down the path when she gets older or when they just get tired of them. And also there's bigger issues. There's the fact that we've got the highest HIV statistics, HIV infection rates. We've got huge gender-based violence issues here in this country. So if you look at a relationship like that, it just opens itself up to so many things going wrong, especially for the woman. And so I don't know about policing it. I know that it's important to speak out about it because, and to kind of warn young women who may get into it with blinders. So I think it's more an issue of talking about it, opening up, like these kind of debates, and really just cautioning young women who may get into it without really realizing some of the consequences that may come with that lifestyle choice.
There's a Facebook page using the name Blesser Finder, which is categorized as a dating site. I don't know if anyone of you have seen it. And it matches young women with rich benefactors. The site has almost 11,000 members and is growing every day. Did you use this site to do research for your book?
I approached about 2 or 3 of those sites. Some of them completely ignored me. And one, I won't disclose which one because they didn't want me to. But one was very forthcoming. They said, look, so I said that I'm writing a book, it's fiction, so I will protect, the names of anyone who subjects that want to come and talk to me. So they said they'll get back to me, and after a few weeks they did. And they had a few ladies who were willing to talk, but there was no blesser who was willing to give me the time of day, so that was quite interesting. And that's where I discovered the different stories, that it's not always kind of black and white. People go into it for different reasons and different motivations. So that was quite interesting because, like I said, the women's stories are different. They are vastly different. There's a woman, but this is a woman that I actually know personally, so she's not in here, okay. There's a woman who's very similar to Bontle. In fact, she's kind of the prototype for Bontle. So she believes that she is on the path to success. And her blesser has blessed her with a government tender, has blessed her with a house. And I shouldn't, okay, I think I've said enough, but because I don't want to get into some of the other details. But I don't know what it does to her soul. I don't know if she's a happy person, but you know, when she walks around and flashes her brand new luxury vehicle, she justifies it and says, like, you know, she knows what she's doing. She's only gonna look so pretty for so long, and if these men are stupid enough to give her the money, so you know. So what do we say about that?
It must be a level 1 blesser, I think. Apparently there's...
Level 10.
Oh, there's different levels of blessers, apparently.
Level 1 buys you 8.
Ah, okay. We don't want level 1, ladies. No, we don't.
And this is what pains me, because when I joined that blesser finding website, I mean, when I approached them, I obviously had to join because that's how Facebook works. And so I joined, and then I spoke to the, I inboxed the administrator. And then, of course, some guy saw my profile, saw my face. But now this guy was I think he was a level 1 blesser because he's a taxi. So that shows where I fit. So I'm going to stay in my lane and just not even attempt to be a blessee. Because I mean, airtime will only get me so far.
Okay. I've got a serious question for you now. So you have said, I don't want to be defined by the color of my skin, and I want to move away from race-based literature. Why do you think that's still an issue in South Africa?
Okay, so when I said that, I think it was shortly after I'd written Red Inks, which was about 10 years ago. I think I was naive. Well, I think there was a bit of naivety in what I said, because I was one of the optimists. I bought into the dream. You know, it was still, I think it was Thabo Mbeki's rule at the time. And I was still buoyed by this kind of spirit of optimism and possibilities and so on. And I think also the fact that I have worked for myself for a long time. And so I've not felt some of the backlash that that black people my age and same background and so on have felt. So I think I was kind of in my own la-la land when I said that, because being a South African now and having heard people's stories and experiences, that I realized that, you know, apartheid and its impact doesn't end in a day or a decade. There's still people that are held back because of structural barriers that cannot be broken just because you kind of signed like a new, Codesa, new constitution and all of that. So there is still space for those kind of stories, and they're important stories and they need to be told. I think at the same time, the stories that I write, yes, they're not race-based politics, they are social commentary and they're very current. And there's room for those kind of stories as well. But I just don't think you can easily discount the fact that we still have to really explore history and its ramifications for us, because for us to move forward, you can't just be in denial and say, hey, but we're all happy now, because we're not, you know? And that's why I think we are having so many racial upheavals. Like, I mean, you've got the white Black Monday and all the stuff that's happening is because we expected kind of a miracle to just happen overnight, and it doesn't work like that. So I'm definitely much more circumspect about who we are and where we're coming from, and much more aware that you don't just kind of gloss over it and say, hey, let's just carry on. You have to dig into the pain, you have to explore it, you have to do the what and all, and then maybe if we're lucky, we'll get it right in about 20 or 30 years time, if we're lucky, if we're open and honest, yeah.
Yeah, we can hope for that, can't we? What would you say to people who claim that books written by local authors are not as good as those written by their overseas counterparts?
I'll tell them to go jump ship. Look, I think this is a phenomenon that's happened in different spheres of the arts here in South Africa. It started, and the pathfinders were actually the musicians. because we were listening to Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up, and whoever, and we thought those guys were the best things that ever happened. But look at who we're listening to now. So you've probably got a favorite local artist, and so that and local music has blown up, and it's phenomenal, and we can relate to it, and it's us, and it represents who we are. So those are the artists that started that revolution. So even in other forms of artistic expression, be it writing and so on, there'll always be that small dorpy, we've got that small dorpy mentality, like, no man, in South Africa, what do we know about writing, whatever. But as we've got more people writing our own stories, and as we're exploring, yes, you might not like my book, but you might like Jacques Paul or Zukiswa Wana or whoever. We're not saying that you must love us because we're South African, but go out there and explore what's out there. You might find, whatever genre it is that appeals to you, you might find that there's a really good local book that's just waiting to be explored. So I think it's just one of those small dorky mentalities that we still have that we need to get out of.
Yeah, and here at Scoobs we really promote local authors. We've launched over 200 in the last 18 months, local authors from the top of Africa to the bottom, so thank you very much. When you first started writing, you enrolled in a How to Write a Novel course through Writers Write. How did this course help and focus you to become the success that you are?
I've been a journalist before, so I was trained in journalistic writing, which is very different from novel writing. And that's one of the reasons why I enrolled for the course. And also, some friends of mine know that I'm a course enroller. Anyway, so I do courses, lots and lots of courses. So anyway, so I enrolled in this course because I had started working on the Moses Sithole biography. And I think it was shortly after I'd met the publisher who said fictionalize it. And when I started looking at my research notes and thinking, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? Yes, I've read thousands of books, but I don't have a voice. I don't know what my writing voice is. And so that's when I enrolled for the course, and that's one of the first things that you discover that we each, if you're a writer, if you believe you're a writer, the first thing that you need to do is to kind of identify and be comfortable with your writing voice. Don't try and be Sidney Sheldon or I don't know, whoever it is that you look up to. Because once you find that voice, then you become steady and focused in your writing. And if you don't find that voice, that's when you're going to edit and end up throwing it away because it's just not coming together, because it doesn't sound like that amazing Charles Dickens novel that you thought you were going to write. So it was actually quite useful because it would be like small groups like this, and then you'd submit your work and you'd judge each other. And the most petrifying thing as a writer is to stand in front of an audience, no matter how big or small, and read out your work, because it just sounds so bad in your ears. You're thinking, my goodness, what was I thinking? But once you're brave enough to do that, then you're brave enough to own and kind of embrace your own voice.
So, do you have plans for a fifth novel? And if so, can you share a little bit with us?
Oh, the pressure. I had started, before writing The Blessed Girl, I'd actually started working on 2 drafts of 2 very different novels. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to at least revisit one of those. One is based in the distant future. So that's a very ambitious novel, and that's one of the reasons why it still hasn't come to light. And the other one was crime fiction. So I'll see. I think between those 2, I'd already started working on that. So I'm sure there's potential for a book somewhere. If not, then I can retire.
So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask